I
should
should
have
have
been
been
there.
there. I should have
I should have
protected you,
protected you.
Kai whispered. Rain fell in sheets across the cemetery, turning the earth to mud and the air to mist. Kai stood before the simple headstone, his expensive coat soaked through, his shoulders hunched against the cold. The marble was new, still bright white against the older, weathered stones surrounding it. Lia Minute Jun beloved. Gone too soon. He knelt, his knees sinking into the wet grass. The bouquet of white lilies trembled in his hands before he placed them carefully at the base of the stone. His fingers lingered there, tracing the carved letters of her name as if the touch might somehow reach her. I should have been there, he whispered. His voice cracked. I should have protected you. The words hung in the air, unanswered. Around him, the cemetery was silent except for the steady drum of rain on leaves and stone. No one else was foolish enough to be out in weather like this. No one else had a reason to be. He closed his eyes, and the memories came unbidden. Her laugh, bright and unexpected in the dim corner booth where she'd served him coffee for 3 years. The way she'd rolled her eyes at his security detail crowding her small diner. How she'd never asked what he did, never treated him like anything more than a difficult customer who tipped too much and stayed too late. She had been ordinary. Beautifully, impossibly ordinary in a world where nothing else was. And now she was gone. Kai pressed his forehead against the cold marble, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The grief was a physical thing, a weight pressing down on his chest until he thought his ribs might crack. He'd lost people before. This business demanded blood. But this was different. Behind him, hidden among the ancient oak trees that bordered the cemetery, a figure stood perfectly still. The rain dripped from the hood of a dark jacket, obscuring her face in shadow. She watched the man at the grave, watched his shoulders shake, watched him break apart in a way she'd never imagined possible. Lia's hands clenched at her sides. Every instinct screamed at her to go to him, to touch his shoulder, to tell him the truth. But she stayed frozen, rooted to the spot by necessity and survival and something that felt horribly like fear. Not yet. It wasn't safe yet. She'd been standing in these trees for 3 days now, watching him come at dawn and again at dusk. Watching him mourn. The guilt was almost unbearable. Kai rose slowly, unsteadily. He stood before the grave for another long moment, his hand pressed flat against the stone as if saying goodbye. Then he turned and walked back toward the black car waiting at the cemetery gates, his steps heavy, his head bowed. Lia waited until the car disappeared down the winding road. Only then did she move, stepping out from the trees and approaching the grave she supposedly occupied. The white lilies lay bright against the dark earth. She knelt and touched them gently, her fingers brushing the same stone his had moments before. I'm sorry, she breathed. But I'm still here. And I'm going to make this right. If you're already hooked by this impossible love story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our next emotional thriller. Now, let's see what happens when the dead refuse to stay buried. The office building looked like any other downtown high-rise, glass and steel reflecting the grey sky, corporate and clean. But the penthouse floor belonged to a different world entirely. Kai walked through the mahogany doors, and his grief evaporated like steam. His face hardened into something cold and impenetrable. His lieutenants waited in the conference room, arranged around the long table like players on a chessboard. You're late, Ren said. He sat at the far end, directly opposite Kai's usual seat, a subtle challenge. His suit was immaculate, his smile friendly, his eyes calculating. I had business, Kai replied. He took his seat without explanation or apology. The others shifted uncomfortably. They'd all noticed the change in their boss over the past 2 weeks. The distraction. The absence. Some whispered about weakness. Others about instability. Ren leaned forward. We need to discuss the shipment. The delay is costing us. Handle it, Kai said flatly. I have been handling it. But decisions need to be made at your level. Then make them. Silence fell over the room. Mia, seated 3 chairs down, exchanged a glance with Ren. She was younger than most of them, brilliant with numbers, and utterly without sentiment. Her fingers drummed once against the table, a signal so small only those watching for it would notice. Boss, said Jin, one of the older members, his voice careful. We're concerned. If you need time. I don't need time. I need results. Kai's gaze swept the table, cold and sharp as a blade. Are there any other issues? More silence. They were testing him, he knew. Watching for cracks in the foundation. In this world, weakness was blood in the water. Good. Then we're done here. He stood and left without waiting for dismissal formalities. Behind him, he could feel their eyes, their speculation, their quiet hunger. Let them speculate. Let them think him weak. He had learned long ago that underestimation was its own kind of weapon. Outside his private office, Kai finally let himself breathe. He moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. Below, life moved in patterns, cars and people, all unaware of the machinery that turned beneath the surface. Somewhere out there, Lia was in the ground. Cold. Gone. Because he hadn't seen the danger coming. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. The flowers were beautiful. Kai stared at the screen. His blood went cold. Wrong number, obviously. Had to be. But his fingers hovered over the delete button for a long moment before he finally pressed it. He needed sleep. He needed to stop seeing ghosts. 2 weeks earlier. The diner had been closed for hours. Lia wiped down the last table, her movements automatic after years of the same routine. The overhead lights hummed softly. Outside, the street was quiet. She didn't hear him enter. Working late. The voice came from behind her, smooth and familiar. She turned to find Ren standing by the door, his hands in his pockets, his expression pleasant. She'd seen him before. He came in sometimes with Kai's group, always polite, always generous with tips. We're closed, she said, keeping her voice friendly but firm. I know. I just wanted to talk to you for a moment. He moved closer, his footsteps soft on the tile floor. About Kai. Something in his tone made her stomach tighten. I don't know what you mean. Please. Everyone knows he comes here for you, not the coffee. Ren smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You've been good for him. Kept him grounded. But that's becoming a problem. Lia's hand tightened around the rag she was holding. I think you should leave. In a moment. He pulled his hand from his pocket. In it was a small vial of clear liquid. This is going to go one of 2 ways. You can drink this yourself, or I can make it look like an accident. Your choice. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Why? Because he's weak when he cares about something. And we can't afford weakness right now. He set the vial on the counter between them. I'm sorry. Truly. But business is business. Later, she wouldn't remember making the decision. She only remembered the burning in her throat, the way her legs gave out, the cold tile against her cheek as the world went dark. And then, nothing. When consciousness returned, it came slowly. Voices above her, distant and echoing. Stable now. The dose wasn't quite right. Sloppy. Can you save her? I already did. But they can't know that. Lia's eyes fluttered open. She was lying on a metal table in what looked like a morgue. The man standing over her was older, grey-haired, wearing a coroner's badge. Welcome back, Doc said quietly. Don't try to move yet. Your body's been through trauma. Where? You're officially dead. Death certificate signed. Funeral tomorrow. He helped her sit up slowly. Ren is thorough, but he's not the only one who knows how to play this game. Kai. Thinks you're gone. Has to, for now. If he knew you were alive, he'd act differently. They'd see it. Doc's expression was grave. You want to survive. You want him to survive. Then you stay dead until we can prove who's trying to kill you both. Lia's mind reeled. How did you? I've worked for Kai's organization for 15 years. I know loyalty when I see it. And I know betrayal. He handed her a phone. You've got time. Use it wisely. When you're ready to come back, make it count. Lia had never been a spy. She'd been a waitress, a student, a daughter. But grief and necessity were remarkable teachers. She learned to move unseen. Learned the rhythms of the city, the blind spots in security cameras, the small moments when people looked away. She cut her hair short and dyed it darker. Wore clothes that made her invisible, hoodies and jeans, nothing memorable. And she watched. She watched Kai visit her grave every morning and every evening. Watched him kneel in the rain and the sun and the wind, always bringing flowers, always staying too long. The guilt was overwhelming. But she also watched the others. Ren, meeting in alleys with people he shouldn't know. Mia, transferring money through channels that didn't match the syndicate's official books. The quiet, careful choreography of a coup being planned in whispers and coded messages. From her small rented room across from the office building, Lia began to piece it together. Ren wanted control, that much was obvious. But Mia wanted something else. Security. Insurance. She was building a second empire in the shadows, using the syndicate's resources to create her own power base. Together, they were formidable. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd assumed Lia was ordinary. Assumed she was just a waitress who happened to catch a dangerous man's attention. They hadn't bothered to learn that she'd put herself through college with scholarships earned in computer science. Hadn't known that she'd spent 2 years working IT before the diner job gave her the flexibility she needed to care for her sick mother. They'd underestimated her. Now she would return the favor. It started small. A bank account frozen due to suspicious activity. A shipment rerouted because of incorrect paperwork. Contractors backing out of deals when their backgrounds suddenly revealed information they'd preferred to keep hidden. Ren began to look tired. His confidence developed hairline fractures. In the conference room, tensions rose like pressure in a sealed container. "Someone is interfering," Ren said, his voice tight. "Someone inside." The lieutenants shifted uneasily. Accusations were dangerous things. Kai listened in silence, his expression unreadable. He'd noticed the problems, of course. Had noticed that each small disaster seemed to target specifically those loyal to Ren and Mia. It was surgical. Precise. Almost familiar. "Perhaps it's simple incompetence," he said mildly. "It's not incompetence." Mia's voice was sharp. "Someone is sabotaging us deliberately. We need to find out who. Then find out." Kai stood. "Until you do, handle your operations more carefully. I expect better from this organization." He left them arguing among themselves. Back in his office, alone, he opened his laptop and checked the security logs that only he could access. There had been unusual activity, ghost signals in their network, traces of intrusion so subtle his best people had missed them. Someone brilliant was playing games in his digital infrastructure. Someone who knew exactly where to cut to cause maximum damage without triggering obvious alarms. His phone buzzed again. "Unknown number. White lilies are my favorite. Thank you for remembering." Kai stared at the message for a long time. Then, very carefully, he typed back, "Who is this?" The response came immediately, "Someone who cares." His heart was beating too fast. This was impossible. It had to be someone playing a cruel trick, using her memory against him. But the flowers, white lilies, he'd never told anyone that was what she'd liked. Never mentioned it to his people. It had been private, a small thing she'd mentioned once in passing. He typed, "Prove it." The response took longer this time. When it came, it was a single word, Maplewood. The coffee she'd always made him. Not just any coffee, a specific blend she'd ordered special, served in a chipped blue mug she kept behind the counter just for him. No one else knew about that. No one else could know. Kai's hands were shaking. He closed the laptop and stood, moving to the window, trying to breathe through the impossible hope rising in his chest. If this was someone's idea of manipulation, it was working. If it was real. He couldn't let himself finish that thought. 2 weeks passed. The problems multiplied. A meeting with Russian contacts collapsed when compromising photos surfaced, photos of Ren with rival gang members, clearly doctored but convincing enough to raise questions. Mia's carefully hidden offshore accounts began appearing in anonymous tips to financial investigators, forcing her to move money hastily and leave traces. The syndicate was turning on itself, suspicion breeding like mold in darkness. Kai watched it all with seeming indifference, his grief apparently making him careless. He missed meetings. Came late to others. Spent hours alone in his office doing nothing productive. At least, that's what they thought. In reality, he was hunting. Following digital trails, tracking the ghost in his system, trying to understand what was happening. The messages continued, small, cryptic things that only Lia would know. Memories. Private jokes. Details of conversations they'd had in the quiet hours of early morning when the diner was empty and the world felt small and safe. Someone either had access to surveillance he'd never known existed, or the impossible was true. He needed to be careful. If Ren and Mia suspected he knew something, they'd accelerate their plans. He needed them confident, overextended, convinced of his weakness. So he played the part. The grieving man, distracted and broken, holding on to power by inertia alone. And he waited for whoever was helping him to make the next move. Lia watched from her window as Ren and Mia met in a cafe across the street from the office building. They thought they were being subtle. They were wrong. She'd planted so many small fires now that they were running out of ways to put them out. Soon they'd have to act decisively. And when they did, she'd be ready. Her phone buzzed. A message from Kai's personal number, the one only a few people had. "I don't know who you are. But when this is over, we're going to talk." She smiled despite herself. He was figuring it out. "Good." She typed back. "When this is over, I'll tell you everything. Promise." Then she deleted the conversation and went back to work. There was still so much to do. We're at the halfway point of this incredible story, and things are about to get even more intense. If you're loving this tale of deception, survival, and impossible love, show your support by hitting that like button. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? We've got more stories like this coming your way. Now, let's see what happens when the dead finally reveal themselves. Ren called for a meeting. Not the usual conference room gathering, but something formal. He'd reserved the penthouse banquet hall, the one used for celebrating major deals, for impressing foreign contacts, for shows of power. The invitation went to all the lieutenants, all the important members of the organization. Mandatory attendance. Kai received his invitation like everyone else. The message was clear: this was theater. A stage being set. He dressed carefully that evening. Black suit, perfect tailoring, the appearance of a man holding himself together through force of will alone. He looked at himself in the mirror and saw what they expected to see: someone fragile. Someone ready to break. Perfect. The banquet hall glittered with crystal and candlelight. Tables were arranged in a U-shape, with Ren at the center and Kai's usual seat notably distant, off to the side. The seating arrangement alone was a statement. Kai took his place without comment. Around the room, conversations buzzed: speculation, gossip, anticipation. Everyone knew something was coming. The question was what, and how bloody it would be. Mia sat near Ren, her expression serene. The financial reports in front of her were carefully prepared, numbers that would tell whatever story she wanted them to tell. "Thank you all for coming," Ren began, standing to address the room. His voice carried easily, confident and strong. "I know these past weeks have been difficult. Uncertain. We've faced challenges both internal and external. And I think it's time we addressed the elephant in the room." Heads turned toward Kai. He met their gazes without flinching. "Our leadership," Ren continued, "has been compromised. Not by external enemies, but by personal weakness. By distraction. By grief that has clouded judgment and left us vulnerable." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Some looked uncomfortable, but others nodded. "I propose," Ren said slowly, "a vote of no confidence. A change in leadership before we're all dragged down by one man's inability to move forward." The room erupted into chaos, voices raised in protest and support, arguments breaking out across tables. Kai remained perfectly still. Perfectly calm. He'd been expecting this. "You're welcome to try," he said quietly. The room gradually fell silent. "But before we vote on anything, I think there are some things everyone should know." "Like what?" Ren's smile was dangerous. "Like who's really been sabotaging this organization. Like where our money has actually been going. Like." The lights went out. Complete darkness fell over the banquet hall. Someone screamed. Glass shattered as people stumbled in the confusion. Emergency lighting should have activated immediately, but it didn't. Kai stayed seated, every muscle tense, his hand moving instinctively to the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. Then, cutting through the chaos, A voice rang out, clear, strong, and utterly impossible. Before you vote, Lia said, maybe you should know who you're really working for. The emergency lights flickered on, dim and red. And there she stood, at the center of the room, alive and real and absolutely furious. The silence was absolute. Ren had gone white. Mia looked like she might be sick. Around the room, syndicate members stared in shock at the woman who was supposed to be buried in the cold ground. Kai couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. Couldn't process what his eyes were telling him. Lia. Alive. Surprised. She walked forward slowly, deliberately, her footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. You should be. Ren certainly went to a lot of effort to kill me. Didn't you, Ren? He found his voice, though it shook. I don't know what you're talking about. You're supposed to be dead. Yes. That was the plan. She stopped a few feet from him, her gaze level and unforgiving. Poison in the diner, staged like an accident. Except the coroner was smarter than you gave him credit for. And I'm harder to kill than you thought. This is insane, Mia interjected, her composure cracking. Even if you're alive, what does that prove? You're just some waitress with delusions. I'm the waitress who's been destroying your coup for the past month. Lia pulled out a tablet, tapped it, and suddenly the screens mounted around the room came to life. Bank records. Communications. Photographs of secret meetings. I'm the ghost in your system. And I have everything. The screens cycled through evidence, damning, irrefutable evidence of embezzlement, conspiracy, contacts with rival organizations. Mia's hidden accounts. Ren's betrayals. The careful architecture of their planned takeover laid bare for everyone to see. You're lying, Ren said, but his voice had lost its power. Those records are fake. They're not. Doc stepped out of the shadows near the door, his expression grim. I verified them myself. Along with the hospital records from the night Ren tried to have Lia killed. Funny thing about poison, it leaves traces. Evidence. The kind that holds up in any court, criminal or otherwise. Kai finally moved. He stood slowly, his eyes never leaving Lia. She met his gaze, and something passed between them, grief, relief, questions too complex to name. But first, business. Is it true? He asked Ren, his voice soft and deadly. All of it. Ren's jaw clenched. For a moment, it looked like he might try to bluff. Then his expression changed, calculation giving way to something uglier. You were weak. You've been weak since she walked into your life. This organization needs strength, not sentiment. I see. Kai's tone didn't change. And the solution was to kill an innocent woman? To destabilize everything we've built? To steal from our own people? The solution was to take what you were too compromised to hold on to. Then you've already lost. Kai made a small gesture. The doors opened, and suddenly the room filled with his loyalists, the ones who'd seemed to fade into the background during the chaos, who'd been watching and waiting for exactly this moment. Ren reached for his weapon, but hands grabbed him first. Mia tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. Take them, Kai said quietly. They'll face the organization's justice. As they were dragged out, still protesting, still threatening, the room gradually began to breathe again. Conversations erupted, shocked, confused, relieved. Kai didn't hear any of it. He was walking toward Lia, closing the distance between them, his heart hammering so hard he thought everyone must hear it. She waited for him, tears streaming down her face now that it was over. You're alive, he said, and his voice broke on the words. I'm alive. You let me think. He couldn't finish. The grief, the rage, the overwhelming relief were all tangled together, choking him. I'm sorry. I had to. If you'd known, you would have acted differently. They would have seen it, and we'd both be dead. She reached out, hesitant, then touched his face. I watched you at the grave. Every day. And it nearly killed me. But I couldn't come back until I could prove it. Until I could make it safe. Kai pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she gasped. She was real. Warm. Alive. Not a ghost, not a dream. Don't ever do that again, he whispered against her hair. I promise. She pulled back just enough to look at him. But I'm not going anywhere now. You're stuck with me. Good. Around them, The organization watched their unshakable boss come undone in the arms of a woman who died and come back. Some looked uncomfortable. Others, oddly moved. But all of them understood, everything had changed. 3 days later, at dawn, Kai and Lia returned to the graveyard together. The rain had finally stopped. Sunlight filtered through the trees, turning the wet grass golden. The cemetery was quiet, peaceful, holding all its secrets in gentle silence. They stood before the headstone that bore her name. "It's strange," Lia said softly. "Looking at my own grave. It shouldn't exist." Kai's voice was rough. "None of this should have happened. But it did. And we survived it." She knelt, touching the marble one last time. "We survived because of it, maybe." She'd brought a sledgehammer from the car. It sat heavy in her hands now, cold metal against her palms. "Are you sure?" Kai asked. "Absolutely." She looked up at him. "I'm not dead. I refuse to leave a marker claiming otherwise. This lie doesn't get to stand." She swung. The first blow cracked the stone. The second shattered it. The marble split into pieces, the carved lies breaking apart under her hands. Kai helped her, pulling the broken chunks from the ground, dismantling the false narrative of her death piece by piece. When they finished, only the hole remained, empty earth waiting to be filled with something true. "What do we do now?" Lia asked, brushing dirt from her hands. Kai looked at her, really looked at her, in the morning light. She was thinner than before, shadows under her eyes from weeks of stress and survival. But she was strong. Unbroken. "Now we rebuild," he said. "The organization. Our lives. Everything. Together. If you want that." He stepped closer, his hand finding hers. "I know what I am. What I do. You could walk away from all of it. Be free." She laughed, the sound unexpected and bright. "Free? I just spent a month playing dead and sabotaging a criminal organization from the shadows. I think Free and I are going to have a complicated relationship from now on. Lia. Besides," she continued, squeezing his hand, "someone needs to keep you from falling apart every time things get difficult. Apparently, that's my job now. I'm serious. So am I." Her expression softened. "I'm not afraid of your world, Kai. I'm afraid of living in one where you don't exist in it. That's the only thing that scares me now." He kissed her then, there among the broken pieces of her false grave, with the morning sun warming their faces and the whole impossible future stretching out before them. When they pulled apart, they were both smiling. "Come on," Lia said, pulling him toward the car. "We have work to do." The syndicate needed rebuilding. Ren and Mia's betrayal had cut deep, leaving gaps in leadership and trust that wouldn't heal quickly. But Kai wasn't alone anymore. In the conference room, now refurbished and rearranged, the new order took shape. Lia sat beside him, not behind, not separate, but equal. The lieutenants had been resistant at first. "A waitress," they'd muttered. "An outsider." Then she demonstrated exactly how she'd infiltrated their supposedly secure systems. How she'd tracked their money, their communications, their secrets. How she'd orchestrated the systematic dismantling of a coup attempt without any of them noticing until it was too late. The muttering stopped. "Financial oversight needs restructuring," she said now, pointing to the charts on the screen. Mia hid her embezzlement in legitimate accounts. "We need better internal auditing." Jin, the oldest lieutenant, nodded slowly. "Do you have recommendations?" "Several. I've drafted proposals for each department. But the key is transparency, at least among leadership. Secret accounts are useful, but they're also vulnerabilities. And you want us to trust you with that transparency?" Someone asked, not quite hostile but not friendly either. "No," Lia replied calmly. "I want you to trust the system. Trust the checks and balances. I don't want power, I want stability. There's a difference." The distinction was subtle but important. Around the table, people exchanged glances. Kai watched her work the room with quiet pride. She was good at this. Better than he'd expected. She had a way of making people feel heard while still pushing them toward the right decision. "There's one more thing," she said, pulling up another document. "We need to address the people Ren and Mia hurt. The families of people who disappeared because they were inconvenient. The businesses they destroyed. If we're going to be better than them, we need to start acting like it. Silence fell over the room. This was dangerous territory, admitting fault, acknowledging victims, opening doors that had always remained firmly closed. That's not how this works, someone said. Then maybe it should be, Lia replied. I'm not saying we become saints. But we can be smarter. More careful. Less cruel when cruelty isn't necessary. And if people see that as weakness, let them. Kai spoke for the first time in 20 minutes, his voice carrying absolute authority. Let them underestimate us. We've seen how well that works out. The point landed. People nodded, some reluctantly, others with genuine agreement. They talked for hours, rebuilding structures and protocols, creating something more resilient than what had existed before. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't be easy. But it was a start. The sun was setting when they finally left the office. The city stretched out below them, lights beginning to sparkle as darkness fell. Tired? Kai asked. Exhausted, Lia admitted. But it's good. It feels like we're actually accomplishing something. They walked to his car in comfortable silence. This was new, this ease between them. Before, their relationship had been stolen moments and careful distance. Now there was nothing to hide. Where do you want to go? He asked as they pulled into traffic. Honestly, the diner. He glanced at her in surprise. Really? I know it sounds strange. But I spent 3 years of my life there. It deserves better than being the place where I almost died. She looked out the window at the passing streets. I want to go back. Take it back, if that makes sense. It does. The diner was closed when they arrived, dark and locked up tight. Lia had kept her key, Doc had retrieved it from her apartment for her. She unlocked the door, and they stepped inside together. It smelled the same. Coffee and cleaning solution and old vinyl. The tables were exactly where they'd always been. The counter gleamed dully in the dim light from the street. Lia walked behind the counter, her fingers trailing over the familiar surface. She found the chipped blue mug exactly where she'd always kept it, tucked behind the coffee filters. You really did remember, she said softly. I remember everything. Kai sat on one of the stools, watching her move through the space with the ease of long practice. Every conversation. Every coffee. Every time you told me I looked terrible and needed sleep. You always looked terrible. She was making coffee now, the motions automatic. Still do, honestly. Thanks. You're welcome. The coffee brewed. The familiar sound filled the silence, comforting, ordinary, normal. When it was ready, she poured 2 cups. One in the blue mug for him. One in the red mug she'd always used for herself. She came around the counter and sat beside him, their knees touching. To surviving, she said, raising her mug. To surviving, he agreed. They drank in silence, watching the city through the diner windows. People passed by outside, unaware of the 2 people inside, unaware of the impossible story they carried. What do you think happens next? Lia asked after a while. I don't know. We keep building. Keep fighting. Keep surviving. Kai set down his mug and took her hand. But whatever it is, we do it together. Together, she agreed. Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside, 2 people who'd died and come back sat in the quiet and planned their impossible future. The grave was destroyed. The lies were broken. And what remained was real, messy and complicated and dangerous, but real. And that was enough. 6 months later. The cemetery looked different in summer. The trees were full and green, casting dappled shadows across the grass. Flowers bloomed along the pathways, bright colors against the weathered stones. Kai stood where her grave had been. The earth had healed over, grass growing thick and green where the marker had once stood. No sign remained of the lie that had briefly existed there. Still coming back here? Lia's voice came from behind him. He turned to find her approaching, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She wore jeans and a light jacket, her hair longer now, pulled back in a ponytail. Sometimes, he admitted. It reminds me. Of what? That we almost lost this. That grief almost broke me. That I need to pay attention, stay present, not take anything for granted. She handed him one of the cups, the blue mug, still chipped, still his. That's very philosophical for 9 in the morning. I've been practicing. I can tell. They stood together where the false grave had been, drinking their coffee, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Do you ever regret it? He asked. Everything that happened. Everything that changed. Lia considered the question seriously. I regret the pain. The fear. Watching you hurt and not being able to stop it. But regret the result. No. She looked up at him. I found out who I am. What I'm capable of. And I found you, really found you, not just the careful distance we kept before. Most people would choose a normal life. Most people aren't me. She finished her coffee and tossed the cup in a nearby trash bin. Besides, normal is overrated. I tried it. Wasn't impressed. He laughed, the sound surprising them both. It came easier now, the laughter. The lightness. The joy. Come on, Lia said, taking his hand. We have a meeting at 10, and you know Jin hates it when we're late. Since when do you care about Jin's schedule? Since he started actually listening to my ideas. I'm rewarding good behavior. They walked back toward the car together, leaving the empty space behind them. The grave that had briefly existed. The lie that had been destroyed. What remained was simple. 2 people, walking forward, carrying their scars and their survival and their fierce, unexpected hope for whatever came next. The cemetery kept its silence. The earth remembered nothing. And life, messy and complicated and precious, continued on. Somewhere in the city, in a conference room filled with dangerous people making dangerous decisions, an empty chair waited. But not for long. They were coming back. Together. And that made all the difference. Thank you for staying with us through this entire emotional journey. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who loves intense romance and thriller stories. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next upload. We have more incredible stories coming your way. What did you think of Lia and Kai's story? Drop a comment below, we love hearing from you. Until next time, stay strong, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones that refuse to die.